Right, so welcome everyone to our fourth episode of the Pawsitivi-tea series. Very, very excited for this one. We've got a bigger lineup than we've ever had before. We've got 3 guests on today, all from kind of different backgrounds, different companies as well. So very excited to introduce you. The title of the talk that we're going through today is how to include inclusion as part of your wellbeing strategy and why that is so important. So we're going to be delving deeper into a few of those issues surrounding companies that aren't sure of how to embed an inclusion strategy, and then some of the individual experiences of people and how it can affect their work, especially. Now, as always, we always start off our webinars by just showing our tea that we've got prepared for us today as we sit down for a chat. I'm being a little bit, I'd say, over the top today by making my traditional Moroccan tea in my fancy little glass for everyone to see. But has everyone else got their tea with them as well?
Yep, I have mine right here in my massive mug.
In the bottom mug.
I wish it was some sort of specialty, but it's just Aldi's own green tea, and it's full caffeine, no decaf. And then the mug itself says, "Think like a lady, act like a boss." So it's one of my favourite mugs in the world.
Love that.
Good. What have you got, Vanessa?
So here's my mug. I've got chamomile tea today.
Nice.
I was looking for my peppermint tea, but couldn't find it, so I'm going for chamomile instead. We love a good chamomile tea. And on this mug, there's a bit of a quote. It just says, "For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper, and plans to give you hope and a future."
Is that a little bit of Jeremiah there, right here?
A bit of Jeremiah there.
Nice.
Yeah.
What have you? Oh, you don't drink tea, Lexie, do you?
No, I'm really boring. I've just got water. I mean, it could be gin and tonic in here, but it is water. I actually forgot to fill it up, so I've got about a quarter of a bottle of water.
Or keeping it healthy, like it. That's good. Just for the viewers at home who will be watching this back, I wanted to just do a bit of an intro to everyone here, so we all know kind of who's attending. I'm going to start off with Vanessa, who is the founder of Inside Out, an award-winning social entrepreneur, and has a background as a psychological therapist and wellness coach. Inside Out are one of our partners as well at Pause in Work, who we've been kind of doing bits with for over a year now, and super excited when we move back to more face-to-face events to do a bit more. But Vanessa, do you want to just introduce yourself a little bit, your background and how Inside Out started as well?
Sure. So thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Yes, I'm Vanessa, and I have a background as a psychological therapist. So I've been working in the mental health field for about 6 years now, and I've worked across public services and private services, and I have a big interest in providing mental health education and mental health support, but particularly with culturally informed wellbeing support as well. So that's basically the foundation of what Inside Out is all about. So with Inside Out, we are a social enterprise, and we provide workshops, talks, events, sessions, all about delivering mental health education in a way that includes culture. And that was something that, from my experience working in the mental health field, and also from my personal experiences, from seeing and witnessing people around me go through their own struggles, one of the things that I really noticed was that conversation of culture, even though it's so important, it's a huge part of who we are, it's a huge part of our identity, but it seems to be the part that's not spoken about the most. So that's what led me towards starting Inside Out. It started off as an event, actually, an awareness event, and then over the years, from doing more talks, more workshops, and working with universities, working with corporates, we've been able to grow into a social enterprise, which is also now a leading provider of culturally informed wellbeing workshops. So yeah, it's been a journey. It's been a great journey as well, but essentially we are all about providing mental health education and support.
Perfect. I know you probably don't big it up enough, but the journey that you've been on in such a short space of time is incredible. And I think what a lot of people probably don't know much about is the actual business model that you have in terms of providing wellbeing workshops for corporates and then feeding that back into the community so that younger people and people who don't have access to mental health education can get that access. So it's such an amazing business model and strategy, and the team at Inside Out are wicked as well. So couldn't be more proud to have you as partners, put it that way. We'll introduce our other two guests as well. Zhaania, I'm going to go over to you first. So Zhaania works at, actually both our next guests work for MVF, who are another company that we've worked with for a while. They were probably one of the first 5 companies that Pause and Work ever worked with after we had kind of initially set up. My brother actually works for the company, so that was our little in at the time. So Zhaania and Lexie both work for MVF. Zhaania is a senior business development manager over there, but also spearheaded the LEAP network, which we're going to talk about in a bit more detail. So yeah, Zhaania, do you mind introducing yourself and just a little bit about what you do over at MVF and a bit about kind of some of the responsibilities? We'll go into more depth about the LEAP network and everything it entails, but just a bit of an overview will be good.
Yeah, so my name is Dania Stevenson. Like I said, I work well as a salesperson here at MVF, and I have done so for the last year and about 10 months or so. And I also chair an incredible network, LEAP, Lived Experience of Ethnic People, which most companies will call a BAME network, but I can explain later why we don't use BAME. But it's a great network. It's been around since about November 2019, October 2019, which is around the same time I just passed probation. So I still look back thinking, how do they give this girl who just joined the company so much responsibility? I don't know. But yeah, I've been running this network. It's a really great team of people from different backgrounds, and we've been able to learn so much as a team and as a business. I think it's incredible to see how much people have just developed in terms of the knowledge over different experiences that people face in different ethnic groups, and the fact that it's just not a taboo topic anymore. Like, people just want to get involved, people want to learn more. And alongside having obviously LEAP, there's the other 2 networks, which are Women's Network and LGBTQ+. So we are working collaboratively and just making MVF the best place to work for in the UK, which it already is, but just continuing that narrative. So more than just talk, is action now, and we're doing really well at progressing as a business and making sure that people feel their true authentic selves at work.
Amazing. And do you know what, again, I'm just going to make sure that people are aware of that what you're chairing, that network, has been shortlisted for Employee Network of the Year at This Can Happen Awards as well. So hopefully that goes through for you. It'd be an amazing achievement to do that within your first year, to head up an Employee Network of the Year. So best of luck for that. Lexie, do you want to go into a bit more depth about yourself? So I mean, Lexie, you're head of talent brand over at MVF, and also an integral role. I think Zhaania kind of alluded to it in terms of MVF being the best company to work for. It was more of a fact than an opinion, because they are Sunday Times best company to work for. And Lexie, you're an integral role in that kind of overall strategy when it comes to employee well-being and everything else involved in creating the best company to work for. So could you let people know a little bit more about your role, what that entails, and what you kind of oversee as part of it?
Yeah, definitely. So I've been at MVF for almost 8 years, which is an incredibly long time. December will be my 8th year anniversary. I started off recruiting, so I recruited, loads of people, probably over 200 people in my time at MVF, including your brother, Adam. Hi, Dash. Okay. And my role sort of evolved into, we started to look more on the inclusion side, and then it evolved into talent brand. So that includes employee engagement, employer brand, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I also work really closely with Hannah, who's our wellbeing partner. So Hannah and I, from an inclusion and a wellbeing perspective, work hand in hand. So a lot of what we do on the inclusion side is part of our wellbeing strategy as well. So Hannah and I recently delivered our neurodiversity celebration week last week, which was really, really good. But I work really closely with Zhaania and all of our network chairs. I love the networks. I could talk all day about how incredible I think they are, hence why I've been shortlisted for this award. But yeah, pretty much driving the inclusion strategy, making sure there's buy-in from the top, and really just sort of accelerating the work, the incredible work the networks are doing, And to Zhania's point, just keeping that conversation going. So a lot of it is starting conversations that people probably would feel quite uncomfortable talking about, and normalizing it. And we've definitely come a long way in the past sort of 18 months, 2 years, but there's a lot more to do.
Amazing. We'll go into a lot more detail about that, because other companies who are tuning into this and people in similar roles who are just getting started on this process and on this journey can take so much from MVF in the way that you've been able to structure the company. I mean, you've mentioned to me before that it's still a work in progress and you're still improving and you're still learning yourself. So for the best company to work for, to still be improving and learning, other people can make that progress, that step now, knowing that you're never necessarily going to be perfect, but what can we do now to get going and get this all kick-started? So perfect, thanks for that. I wanted to start off just really quickly from Vanessa, if you're able to give people a little bit more of a background, and I guess a bit more of the science behind kind of the impact that being from different social kind of backgrounds can have on mental well-being, and just a little bit more of that kind of psychological background, that knowledge that you'll have and that you tend to share with people, and what impact that can have on people when they are in the workplace. If you're all right to speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So I think when we are talking about different backgrounds, and we're talking about who we are as people, one important thing to consider is intersectionality. So about how we all have different social constructs that make us who we are. And of course, with those different social constructs, so for instance, race, gender, ability, ethnicity, culture, class, sexuality, all of these different social constructs, they don't just have an impact on us as individuals, it also has an impact on the way that we experience the world. So the way that we are treated, perhaps maybe the way that we see things, that will be impacted by these different social constructs as well. So I think taking that into consideration to start off with is a good starting point, because it just gives us the understanding that everyone's identity is going to be different, because everyone's social constructs, everyone's going to identify as different things. And when we're looking at the impact that being from a different background, maybe identifying as different social constructs can have on well-being, it's important to also consider that our identity has an impact on the way that we perceive things. So the way that we perceive things also has an impact on the way that we feel and the choices that we make and the things that we do. So just to put that all into context, there's a concept called the cognitive cycle, and that cognitive cycle, it just gives us the understanding that the way that we think about things has an impact on the way that we think about the future, and also the way that we think about where we're going to go in our next steps as well. So if, for example, just to use an example to illustrate this, if, for example, or even just to use myself as an example, as a Black woman, perhaps maybe the things that I see on the media about what it's like to be a Black woman, maybe that stereotype that we seem to hear a lot about, Black women being aggressive and things like that, Black women having attitudes, that might have an impact on the way that I feel about myself. So I might not feel that I will be able to fit in the workplace because people perceive me to be a particular way, or I might feel that I might not be able to speak up about things that I'm having difficulties with because that might come across as aggressive. And even when I'm trying to bring my point across, people might see that as something completely different. So in the long run, if I am suppressing these thoughts, suppressing these emotions, I'm not able to express myself, that then has an impact on my self-esteem. And I'm not able to actually, if an opportunity comes out in the workplace to, for instance, for a promotion, I might feel that, okay, I can't, put myself out for this because of the lack of self-esteem. And that's why we see a lot of things like imposter syndrome building up within the workplace as well, with people who are from different backgrounds, because they may feel that they're not good enough to be able to achieve these things. So overall, anyway, when we are talking about culture, intersectionality, it can have an impact on self-esteem in lots of different ways, particularly in the workplace where you may feel that you don't fit in. I hope that gives a summary of that.
You know what, it's a perfect summary, and I think it's a perfect way to let people understand how much of an impact that can have on an individual going into a workplace. I think, do you know what, I was going to kind of say something, but I think it'd be really good to go to Zhaania, because I know you'd mentioned previously about other workplaces that you've been in where you have felt slightly differently to MVF. And going off the back of what Vanessa said, it'd be great to hear about your previous experiences in workplaces and maybe the impact that it's had on you in comparison to coming to a workplace which is slightly more aware of these issues. Could you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, happy to. So I definitely, yeah, everything that you just said, Vanessa, I was like, yeah, I know that's how I felt before. So yeah, in a previous role I was in, it was straight out of uni, and yeah, it was just my first experience of the workplace, and you know, there wasn't really much to expect except from the fact that I just wanted to work. And it was one, very male orientated, and two, very white. So I remember joining, and the two only Black girls there were the first to actually greet me, talk to me, ask me how I was and everything like that, which was great. But I overall did feel like the odd one out a lot of the time. I was the only Black girl generally on my team. I remember having certain comments being said, and when there was one comment that was like, oh, you know, all Black people can dance, and I was just like, why would you think that? She was like, oh, because of maybe the tribes they were in before. And I remember sitting there like, I'm sorry, but I am the only one here that can defend myself in this. And I remember feeling so uncomfortable, I couldn't even say anything to her face because I didn't want to look like the aggressive Black woman because I'm defending myself. So I remember speaking to her afterwards, but just generally, I remember being in that workplace and just I couldn't grow. I couldn't grow as a person. I was pretending to be someone I was not the whole time. It was so diminishing and it was very draining. And there was a situation where I did feel very upset about something that happened, rightfully so. I had a reason to feel that way. And instead of my manager kind of being like, oh, you know, how can I help you? Or, you know, what do we want to do about this? He kind of stood up and just told me not to be so aggressive. And I remember sitting there like, I'm not being aggressive. I'm literally crying in your face. Like, how is that aggressive? I really don't understand. And being called that made me silent. And I'm not a silent person, and I'm not shy. I don't like confidence, but that particular environment made me close up. But I remember joining MVF, and when the network started, and you know, I was just like, I find it so crazy that we're talking about race in the workplace. Like, why is that happening? And it was so weird to me, but it became so natural so quickly because it needed to be discussed. I think once I sat in a room full of people who looked like me and told me about their experiences, I realized, okay, I'm not on my own in this, and this isn't a weird thing. Like, it is a weird thing to happen, but it's just the fact that it wasn't just happening to me, and the fact that I could sit there and try and encourage others, and they were encouraging me. It was such a nice safe space. And I mean, MVF as a whole, it's just a blessing to work for a business like that, who are just so open to wanting to hear you out and not put you down for who you are, what you look like, what you believe, nothing. I've never felt so welcomed in my entire life in any organization. So it's been great to be able to lead the LEAP network and to help people be their authentic selves at work, be individual, and feel like they have a limitless future, and not just at MVF, but just beyond that as well. So yeah, I think that imposter syndrome has happened to me before in the past, but at MVF, it's just not possible to be that person because they only want you to be who you are, which is incredible.
Amazing. And do you know what, that I think with the story that you've just mentioned there, the responsibility, ultimately there's a level of responsibility that the person who is saying those ignorant statements is making, and they have their own responsibility to educate themselves, and why that's an inappropriate thing to say, not even just in the workplace, but just in general. But ultimately, it's up to the company to foster an environment where that sort of thing doesn't happen. And yeah, MVF have clearly fostered that environment and have been able to create something whereby that wouldn't fly at MVF. If you have a company where that does, then there's something really wrong at the top level. I think it has to come from top down as opposed to bottom up and trying to force your way to make it work, because it's never going to work for you. Like you said, you're never going to be able to grow in that environment. But that's kind of incredibly interesting. It probably leads us onto the LEAP network to speak on that in a bit more detail. So going on from that experience of your previous workplace and feeling like you couldn't grow, and then just starting at MVF, how did that whole idea come about to create the network? What does it entail? What happens with meetings and who's involved in it? Could you explain all about it?
Yeah, I mean, there's certain parts that I can go into, and there's certain parts Lexie can definitely explain about how to create it. But well, when I joined MVF, I was pretty much a Bambi anyway. I became a very shy person, and yeah, I think when it first sort of happened, it was actually someone who addressed Black History Month because it wasn't really celebrated at MVF at the time, and I sat with Lexie, and from there we then had a group of about, I think it was about 6 or 7 of us in a room, all Black people, and we just discussed our experiences in the workplace, and it was maybe the first time for many that we were able to do this. And from there, I think there was such a sigh of relief. We were like, we need to keep doing this. Like, we can't, I'm sure we're not the only people that feel this way. And from there, we then had a meeting with Ange, who's our Chief People Officer, and she sat us down and we came up with a vision and a mission for what we wanted. And we knew we didn't want to call it a BAME network. It just didn't feel right to call it that. And the reason, there's so many reasons why we didn't want to call it BAME anyway. I guess one, it just kind of groups all non-white people into one, and it's so dehumanizing. It doesn't differentiate sufficiently, and it misses the challenges that different ethnic groups face whilst in the same race as well. And then as a global business, it's better to take it as a real world perspective, because non-white people are not the minority when we look at this from a global perspective. So that's why we felt like lived experience of ethnic people is as inclusive as it can be. I think we also realize that white people, being white is an ethnicity, so no one's missed out from this. So that's why we call it LEAP. And that came about after a meeting of coming together. It was like, I think we were in the office until like 8 o'clock at night just discussing this, and from there it was a bit of a slow start because we didn't really know what we were doing. We didn't know where we could push the boundaries, how uncomfortable are we going to feel, and how others are going to feel about this, and it was accepted from day one, but no one was really sure what could really be done. And I think straight after the sort of George Floyd death, that's when things just ramped up, because I think I remember sitting in my room 10 o'clock at night that evening when it happened and just being like, I cannot sit here and not talk about this. This has to be addressed. And I spoke to the leadership team and we all agreed. And from there, it's just been, I mean, LEAP just took off incredibly. I mean, the content that we've been able to do, the resources, the blog posts, even the organic information that has come on the channel without us probing has been so incredible. And we've just been able to learn so much as a business, and just individually, I've had so many messages of people who just want to learn so much more. And then Black History Month came about as well, which was incredible. We had Dr. Shola come join us, and she really shook up MVF big time. And then from there, we've just been able to just actually live out our mission of celebrating all the diverse cultures and the backgrounds we have here at MVF. And also from there doing Leap and Learn, which is an external program that we set up with a school, School 21 in Stratford. And we basically let them join as new starters over a course of a few weeks or a period of months. And yeah, they learn about MVF, they learn about digital marketing, about sales, about tech. And it's just allowing them to see success in their own image, because in that school, majority of them have LEAP backgrounds. And we just want them to see, like, yes, you can be in these sort of roles. You don't have to do the generic roles that your parents may want you to do. Like, you can go into tech and into marketing, and that's normal because the world is changing. You might as well adapt to it. So we're running this for the second time this year. We're actually, I don't want to say halfway through, but a month in, but they're incredible. And I think I've really underestimated how intelligent these young people are and how much potential they have. Like, they could easily start the business today if they could. I mean, I wish they could, but yeah, there's so much that has come about from LEAP, and a lot that we're still striving to do better and better from. So yeah, it's been an incredible year and however long of putting this all together.
Amazing. Lexie, I will come to you to kind of talk a little bit more on how you can facilitate this type of network. But Zhaania, I can't believe that you came into MVF as a shy individual who wasn't sure of her capabilities. Just from
I know,
listening.
right?
It's honestly, I think we will go onto this a little bit more later on, but if companies can't see that by allowing people to be themselves, you're getting the best out of people, that's proof in the pudding there, with the passion that you show for it and being able to drive this network forward, and how well you've done with it. I think your explanation behind LEAP was perfect as well. I hadn't actually looked at it before from that lens, and why it's been called what it is and why that's more inclusive. Because thinking about it, you're absolutely right. When people talk about BAME mental health, well, that's going to be different for every single nationality and people from different backgrounds. You're not going to experience the same thing as someone who might be from India versus someone who might be from somewhere in some other part of Asia or South America. Like, it's going to be a completely different cultural background. There can be all sorts of different experiences that come into it, and to group that into one category and go, here you go, we've sorted out BAME mental health in our organization, is almost patronizing in a way. So you've explained that absolutely perfect for anyone who doesn't understand why that can be a bit of a problematic term sometimes within workplaces. Vanessa, I was thinking, as Zhaania was explaining more about the work with schools, if you could let people know a little bit more about the work with young people that you do, and actually the point on having role models and seeing people's in positions that you didn't know you might be able to go into, how important that is for young people, as well as kind of seeing mental health being talked about for the young people that you worked with as well. Do you mind speaking on that a little bit?
Yeah, I was literally just about to say, I absolutely love the work that you're doing. Absolutely love it. It's so amazing. And one of the key things that I really heard from that was representation. And particularly, what really stood out to me is the work that you're doing in schools as well. I think that's literally right up my street. So I'm so glad about that. With representation, of course, we know that is something that is very important, particularly for young people, especially young people from, as what you described as, LEAP backgrounds. And there may be perhaps belief systems that have been put in place from a young age that can be quite limiting. So being able to actually see other people who look like you or who are representative of the places that you're from or the places that you grew up, or have maybe similar social constructs to you, that can do a whole lot of stuff for an individual's confidence levels. And I know we spoke about self-esteem, how maybe not being able to speak up about things might have an impact on self-esteem and imposter syndrome as well. Even just simply seeing someone who looks like you, someone from a similar background to you, in a position that you want to be in, that just opens up a whole new area of aspirations. It drives aspirations, it drives confidence for these young people as well. So yeah, it's really amazing to hear the work that you're doing. And in terms of working with young people, so just like Adam explained, with the way that our business model works, we work with corporates, we work with universities, and the funding that we get from that allows us to provide free community-based workshops for young people. So we've gone into schools, we've gone into colleges, we've done things in the community as a way of raising awareness. And with this, the whole ethos behind it is an idea that I am very, very passionate about, which is prevention is better than cure. And allowing young people to be able to develop the tools and techniques to be able to manage their mental health and well-being, and just even having that awareness of different concepts, having the awareness of different types of mental health difficulties, even just having that awareness itself, so that if they do face any life events or life situations or challenges later on, they have those tools already to be able to deal with it. And that itself, again, is about improving confidence. You're much more able to, combat a situation if you have the tools in place beforehand. So that's a huge part of what we're doing: prevention and early interventions, and providing that in a holistic way. Just like we described with giving the mental health education, mental health support, but then also looking at other areas of their life as well, like their career, you know, what they aspire to be, and their physical health as well. So all of these different things do tie in, and it just gives young people that understanding that they can, you know, look after themselves, they can support other people. Because I know for myself anyway, when I was in school, there was no such thing as mental health education. That was not a thing. And I know that I personally have been in situations before where if I had known what to do, or if I had known about a particular skill, or if I had known how to actually support someone who may be experiencing you know, mental health struggles, that would have helped so much. But then that lack of knowledge, again, talking about that confidence, may have decreased my confidence, self-esteem, with not being able to approach the situation. So yeah, it's really, really important to provide that support for the young people.
I guess that goes hand in hand as well when we're talking about the practical elements of kind of chasing a career that you're after and being put into positions that, Zhaania, you mentioned before, where you've faced discrimination in the workplace. How do you deal with that situation when it comes up? And how do you progress from that? And giving young people the tools at an early age to be able to do that can definitely fast track that progress, I imagine, over time. So yeah, it all makes complete sense. Lexie, I was going to ask you to just have a little bit of an input on almost just how MVF has kind of managed to put itself in a position where this has all been enabled and allowed to happen. Because there will be companies out there who are thinking, Leap sounds amazing, the work that Vanessa's doing is great, and we'd love to get maybe the talent pool of the young people they're working with on board in our companies, for instance. But how do we start a program or a strategy where an inclusion strategy, I guess, for the workplace, which entices that talent to come in, is better for our employees and makes business sense as well? How do you start those steps?
Definitely. So I suppose there's two elements to it. And the first thing that we did at MVF, because when we started our inclusion journey a few years ago, you know, just to give an example, some people on the exec board, and this isn't a criticism, it's more just sort of outline where we were. Some people on the exec board hadn't even heard of the term unconscious bias. And I was quite surprised by that, because I just assumed that if you're in a leadership role, you'll be quite sort of well versed in what's happening in the wider world. So that really sort of set a precedent that we were going into this quite unknown. Not everyone was on the same page. We had some people that had never really understood what it's like to be othered within a company. They'd always fitted in, which I hate the term, because that's almost encouraging people to strip bits away of themselves to try and fit in with everyone else. So we needed to create a common language, and we did that through working with a company called the Centre for Inclusive Leadership, who are amazing, and they helped us create a workshop that we delivered in-house. Zhaania's been through it as well, actually, but we created a workshop, and it's 3 hours, and it's essentially, it's called Conscious Inclusion, but it's really an introduction to what inclusion is at MVF. You know, why are we doing this? Why is it important? Yes, it's the right thing to do, but it also makes commercial sense. And I think as a business, you shouldn't shy away from the commercial impact inclusion can have, because you're almost doing it a disservice. And yes, it's great to have everyone feel like they can be their authentic selves, but the impact that has on performance can be massive. So we had this massive workshop. Over 200 MVFers have gone through it, and we've trained facilitators in the house. So when we're delivering it, we give real life examples. It's not sort of an abstract concept that people can't visualize how this works in the office. We give examples at MVF of when maybe we haven't been very inclusive, you know, when we have messed up and we actually, this is what we could do better next time. So that really sort of opened the door to inclusion, because people walked away thinking, okay, I know why this is important, and I know why MVF are doing this. And then what sat behind that was the data. So all the stuff that Zhaania mentioned, all the incredible stuff the Leap Network do, are essentially tied to objectives. We don't just sort of wake up and we're like, oh, what should we do this week? It's with a purpose, and it's to have a business impact. So we talk about bringing talent into the business, and by partnering with School 21, we're hopefully building this incredible talent pipeline that we can bring into MVF in a few years' time. And we talk a lot about internal moves, and the data shows that over the past 2 years, 1 Leap female has applied for an internal role at MVF, which is horribly low, one person, one LEAP woman. And that then made us think, well, how can we get more LEAP women applying for roles at MVF, and what's holding them back, to the points Vanessa and Zhaania made around what it feels like to be in the workplace and what's holding you back. So we've created objectives around that the LEAP network and all our networks feed into, but we call that process understanding our facts of today. So what is the data telling you, and what's happening now? Where do you want to be? And what data are you missing? Because when we started this journey 2 years ago, the only data we had was gender. We could only tell you the story of men and women. We didn't, that was the only gender fields that we collected, which in itself isn't inclusive, but we could only tell the business that. We couldn't talk about ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, all of that was missing. And so we've made sure now, over the past 2 years, we've collected this data to now understand what our facts are, what it looks like today, and where we want to be. And once you have that, it's really, well, I say it's easy, may not be everywhere, but once you have that data, you can really tell that compelling story as to why you need to change. And then you can build elements around that, whether it's a workshop, whether it's a network, but that data is key, because that's where you can really track the impact you're having.
Perfect. And how much of that is driven, I guess, by the employees within the company versus the senior leadership? How much do you rely on buy-in from employees to make all of this happen?
I think it's definitely, it's a two-way thing. People talk a lot about senior buy-in, and yes, that is important, because ultimately the exec board at MVF do make final decisions. So it is important that you have senior buy-in, and we do at MVF. But it's also really important to have employee buy-in as well, because what you need to be doing needs to feel authentic. If it feels forced and you're doing this because of what's happened over the last 12 months, or you're doing this for a tick box exercise, people aren't going to be engaged, because it won't feel part of who you are as a business. So I think that's where the networks are so key, because it's not my voice. My voice doesn't, is one part of an inclusion journey. It isn't the whole voice. And the networks really ensure that all employees' voices are heard at MVF, and they can be brought to the forefront alongside that senior buy-in. So I definitely think the two have to work hand in hand.
Okay. And do you get that? I know you've mentioned before about having a lot of feedback from employees. How do you tend to utilize that and really get a good picture as to what people want within the company, or what you can be doing to improve your support networks and the rest of it? Do you have kind of regular questionnaires that you send out to people, or is that quite reactive depending on when you need information? How do you tend to structure that feedback?
So we're lucky in the sense that MVF, we say we have a feedback culture. Everyone loves giving feedback, which is great, because you know what's working and you definitely know what isn't working. So we do really encourage feedback, and I don't shy away from it. If something isn't working, I want to know about it. And so over the next 6 weeks or so, we're going to be sending out our first inclusion survey through the engagement tool that we have. And that will be really interesting. That's the first time that we've ever asked for feedback on one particular element of our inclusion strategy at MVF. Other ways that we've gathered feedback historically has been in more ad hoc ways. So we ran a wellbeing survey earlier this year in January, and we got feedback around the networks from that as well. But we haven't done something that purely focuses on the networks. But even the networks themselves always give each other feedback as chairs and co-chairs on, how their network can be more inclusive, because we don't always get it right.
Yeah, I know Zhaania kind of alluded to the networks. Do you mind just giving a bit of an overview as to the networks that you actually have within MVF, and are there any more plans to get more networks in, or plans to kind of get them collaborating more? How's that structured?
Sure. So we have 3 networks: LEAP, Women's Network, and LGBTQ+. And each network has a chair or a co-chair, and then a leadership committee that sits underneath that. And that can be a variety of different roles. So every network has its own mental health first aider in it. So we ensure that anything that we do that may be slightly triggering, or if we have a conversation that people may find is a bit much, then we ensure that we have those mental health first aiders to reach out to people who were in those conversations. And also we put something on Tetra, which is our company wiki as well. So each network has their own roles within that. And then on top of that, they have their vision, their mission, and the objectives that they're working towards. And they feed into our wider inclusion targets. We have 5 inclusion targets for the next financial year. So that's how they're sort of set up in essence. But then it's pretty much down to the network to sort of decide events, what's coming up, what do they want to celebrate, what do they want to highlight. We have an events calendar that we sort of go through at the beginning of the year to see who's going to be doing what. This financial year was the first time we've ever got budget for the networks, which is really, really exciting. So each network had to present to the finance director in regards to what they wanted, what they were going to use the money for, the ROI, and how they were going to show success. And now they have a budget they can work with over the next year. So it's almost like it's a mini business within MVF.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I think that perspective is missing from a lot of companies as well. When they look at this, it's almost seen as a burden in a way, to go, it's easier for us to sweep this under the carpet and not worry too much because what we've been doing has been working, and not actually see the business potential in terms of how much better you will run and how much commercial sense it makes to foster that environment. And again, to what you said, bringing in better talent along with that, and getting better results from people within their own roles because they're happy to work in that environment and are really passionate about the things that they're doing. I think that's severely underestimated. But the breakdown that you've given, it makes so much sense, and it seems very simple. I imagine there's obviously a lot of hard work behind it, and it's not as simple as what you've kind of said, but it shows that you can build on an idea and really make it work for your company. And this has probably been in the works, like you said, for years at this point, but it's about making the first step for a lot of people. What I wanted to ask you, Vanessa, about really quickly is a little bit on the topics that you kind of touch on in a lot of your workshops and courses that you do about cultural competency versus cultural humility, especially for people who are kind of approaching this for the first time and maybe trying to understand and open up their mind a little bit to new ideas, and really trying to get on board with learning and seeing kind of a viewpoint from other people's lens. But could you explain a little bit more about that, the difference between the two, and what people should be kind of aiming to achieve, and how they should approach these situations?
Yeah, so it really goes off the back of what Lexie mentioned. She mentioned something that really stood out to me, which is that it's not just a tick box exercise. And I think something that happened this time last year after the whole George Floyd situation happened was even Inside Out, we had organizations, companies contacting us saying, yep, we want to do a workshop, we want to do a workshop, we want to do a workshop. And that's fine, that's all well and good. But of course, what we want to avoid is the performatism, is that a word? Yeah, we want to avoid that you know, feeling that you need to do something just for the sake of it. And so when we look at the difference between cultural competency and cultural humility, of course, I'm sure in lots of different workplaces, they may have cultural competency training, and that's good. That's you know, that's the starting point. It's great that we have that in place. Of course, with cultural competency, that involves, you know, developing an awareness of different cultures, maybe awareness of different identities that you may come across in the workplace, and essentially developing that knowledge. So with cultural competency, that's more knowledge based. But of course, we can't just you know, go to a training session for 2 hours or 2 days or whatever it is, and then at the end, yeah, I'm culturally competent, and that's it. You've got a certificate, and you know, that's the end. And that's where we move from cultural competency to cultural humility. So that's something that we go into a bit more depth in our workshop. So we've got a workshop on intersectionality and mental well-being. And with that, it's more moving towards the idea that cultural humility is something that we do on a daily basis. Of course, like we've seen, intersectionality and those different social constructs has an impact on the way that people live their lives, the choices that they make, the way that they experience the world. So this is an ongoing thing. It's not something that just happens for 1 week and then that's it, or happens for a month and then that's it. these are things that are affecting people's lives on a daily basis. When they wake up in the morning, when they go to work, when they go to the shop, when they access healthcare, when they're accessing mental health care, wherever they go, it's with them. So this again gives us the idea that cultural humility is what is recommended to work towards developing that ongoing understanding. It's almost like a lifelong commitment in a way, where you are, number one, developing an understanding of your own position in society and your own different social constructs, and how that forms your lens that you're using to view the world, but then also being open to challenging yourself and being open to seeing things from other people's perspectives, and also learning, that ongoing learning process as well. So that's the main difference between cultural competency and cultural humility. Of course, as I mentioned, it's not to put cultural competency to the ground. That is important, but not just staying there, and also working towards cultural humility as well. And they do go hand in hand, but of course cultural humility, as I mentioned, is a more longer term process that I think everyone should be working towards on a daily basis.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense when you put it that way as well. And I think there'll be a lot of people who probably see that within their company and think, actually, have I approached that as more of a tick box and just a thing that I felt like I had to do, as opposed to really trying to dig deep into what can I do long term to kind of affect change within my company and organization. And it's struggles that everyone has. I don't think the point of this chat is to almost chastise people and make people feel really bad about themselves. It's about how can we do better tomorrow? What can we do to make things work? And I look at a company like ourselves, even at Pause and Work. So we're very young in our journey. We are a startup. We've only got sort of single digit employee numbers, but it's crucial even for us to start thinking about it now, because we will get to the stage where we've got 20, 30, 40, 50 people potentially, and then we grow into an MVF type company that has hundreds, if not thousands of employees. And if you don't set that benchmark early on, then you're setting yourself up for failure down the line as well. So it's crucially important for startups. I was going to ask a question, and this is probably an open floor question just for anyone who wants to take it. If you were going to recommend something for a smaller company, a startup such as ourselves, they might not have much budget to implement things. They might have a kind of team that are running around ragged and constantly busy and constantly working. What are some practical things that we can do at this point in our journey to ensure that going forward, we're aware of these issues and we're setting ourselves up for success? And that's kind of open to anyone who kind of has a thought on it.
I don't mind sharing.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So I was just going to say something really simple, which is listening. I think that's the simplest thing that we can do as human beings in general, especially within the workplace, and not just listening to respond, but listening to actually hear. Because sometimes what can happen is we come across lots of difficulties and challenges and things like that, and as people who do generally want to support others, it may be the case where you think of maybe 10 different ways of helping someone, but those 10 different ways that you have thought of might not be the way that the individual wants to be supported. And so this is where listening to actually hear what the person is actually experiencing, what their needs are, perhaps maybe ways that they can implement some ideas and things like that, and also collaborating with them in that aspect as well. Again, as part of listening, sometimes we listen to while someone is talking, we're almost preparing the response in our minds to be able to give the perfect answer. But rather than focusing on that, just listening and hearing what the individual has to say. And it really does sound like, from what Lexie and Zhaania have spoken about, that's something that is really ongoing within the company as well, especially with the feedback, and seeing that feedback being implemented is, just empowering individuals to know that when I do speak up about something, there is things being put in place for that. So that's number one. That would be the foundation of what I would say, just simply listening to your colleagues, listening to people in the workplace.
I think that's so well summarized, and it costs nothing as well.
Literally free.
Yeah, you don't need a budget to get feedback and to get that kind of interaction with employees. And I think there's a lot of merit in being able to be someone who is in a senior position within a company and really humble yourself to listen to people who, in a hierarchical sense, are seen as lower in the company hierarchy because they've just started and you're a director or you're someone senior in the team, and humbling yourself enough to understand that you don't know it all and you need to listen to other people regardless of the position that they are in the company, because everyone has something valuable to give to you and to make you a better leader as well in the company.
Even just something to add on to that, sorry, even using, so a practical way of implementing this would be through something as simple as reverse mentoring. So getting people from different backgrounds or maybe different positions to actually mentor senior leaders. And of course, that sounds a bit, where am I going with this? But again, it's just more to actually foster that way of being able to get and amplify voices as well through that reverse mentoring, because there's something that you can learn from everyone and we're always learning. So it's a way of being able to actually implement that in the workplace.
I've never heard that term before, actually. It's definitely something, I love the sound of that, because you can do that in any aspect as well. It doesn't have to be work related, it can be all sorts of things.
And again, it's free.
Yeah, 100%. That's wicked. I'm conscious that we've kind of got to an hour now. I think we could talk about this for 3-4 hours and still kind of come up with loads of different ideas and bits that people have done and implemented. But I think there's a lot for companies to go off here from what we've spoken about today, and how important it is to start developing your inclusion strategy if you haven't already done that, and really fostering an environment which is people feel kind of proud to come into work, exactly to what kind of Zhaania has been speaking about so passionately today. Thank you all so much for kind of giving your thoughts and views and opinions and how you've kind of made your own personal companies and journeys of success as well. Last thing I was just going to say, is there anything that you wanted to just throw out there and plug for people, whether they want to get on board with stuff, or even just to mention a few bits that are going on within your company over at MVF as well? Vanessa, I don't know if you want to start and just let people know kind of a couple of bits that you've got going on.
Sure. So within Inside Out, as I mentioned, we work with corporates and organizations as well, and we deliver workshops around mental health, particularly culturally informed topics. So one of the topics that we do cover, which we have been speaking about today, is intersectionality and mental health and mental well-being. So if that is something that anyone is interested in, then please feel free to have a look at our website. It's insideoutwellbeing.org, and there's some information there, and feel free to get in contact with us as well.
Zhaania, do you want to just recap the kind of bits that you're doing with the schools locally as well, and if there's anything else that you wanted to throw in?
Yeah, so the good thing about the relationship we have with School 21 is that they always invite us in for assemblies. So the way it actually started with them anyway was that they invited us in for the Black History Month assembly that happened last year. There were a lot of kids that were so confused by the situation. Obviously, they'd seen this video online and they all felt affected by it and they didn't know what to do. So the sixth form coordinator there invited us in. It was a panel of us. All of us were basically leapers, and we just discussed with them. We didn't even have it as a presentation itself. It was literally just, hi, this is who we are, this is our experience, let's talk. And it was I remember feeling so emotional coming out of the assembly because the kids really opened up. They really spoke about some horrible experiences they had in the past. And I think the worst thing was one of them worrying that they wouldn't be able to get their dream job because of who they are. And I was just like, that is hard. That is really tough to hear from a 16-year-old who is literally in the earliest stages of their life. So from there, we even did an International Women's Day with them earlier this year. And I think we have more plans to do more assemblies with them where they need us. So yeah, they're always in touch with about that. Obviously, we're doing Leap and Learn as well. So we have 13 students with us. We actually had 5 last year and 13 this year. So it's a huge step up. And they are with us from April last month and then all the way to July. So they're working on their projects at the moment. Really, really lively group of kids. So it's really nice to have them. And yeah, next month we have a lot of stuff going on in terms of sickle cell awareness. We have Windrush Day, which is coming up, Juneteenth. I feel like I am still, and World Refugee Day. So there's a lot going on in comms wise for LEAP next month. And yeah, a lot for people to learn coming from there as well. So stay tuned.
Amazing. Nice. Lexie, is there any other bits that you wanted to kind of throw in for people to look out for?
Not really. I suppose I was just going to finish with sort of the three takeaway things if you want to start, not if you should start an inclusion strategy in your workplace. The first is getting the data. So what's the data telling you compared to where you want to be? The second one being starting that open communication. So to Vanessa's point around listening, we have something called the HEARS model, which what you were saying, Vanessa, really resonated with me, because you have to listen to actually actively listen, not to respond. And we do an exercise where we have 4 sheets of paper, and it's I feel included when, I feel excluded when I'm included I feel, and when I'm excluded I feel. And we just get everyone in the room to just write down whatever comes to mind. And that's a really nice starting point. So you can start to see in your business how you're unconsciously excluding and including people. And the last point is just changing the mindset. We always say, people don't wake up thinking, how can I actively exclude someone in the workplace? People don't do that. That's a horrible thing to do. But conversely, people don't wake up and think, what am I going to do today to include someone? And the more that people start to think the latter, the more companies will start to be inclusive, because inclusion is a feeling. It's not a tangible outcome. It's how people feel in your workplace. And if you start to open that conversation and invite people into it, then you will start to sort of informally start your inclusion strategy without having an official plan, and it's somewhere to start.
Perfect. That's beautifully summed up. I think that's going to be so beneficial for people watching. Thanks again, everyone. You've been amazing. Learned so much from this today, and I'm going to be watching it back and probably messaging all of you for advice on certain bits as well, where we've not been able to go into as much detail. But yeah, thanks again. Lovely chatting, and I'm sure we'll do it again soon.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.